Good morning, Northeastern Ohio, Geauga County, and Lake County. Welcome to the Voice of Geauga, where we will enlighten you, inform you, and entertain you. I switched those up. Did you notice that, Jonathan? Not in the same order. Every Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Here on WINT Radio 101.5 or 1330 AM. Also streaming to Rumble, Facebook, and YouTube. And so I see our Rumble channel starting to show up. All of our folks are getting their coffee this morning and waking up. So wake up, Rumble folks. And Facebook, we had some Facebook folks out there yesterday chiming in on chat, which was fun and interesting. I see I need to adjust my uh, screen a little bit for our channel to enlarge Jonathan and myself. With me this morning, I've got Jonathan Broadbent.
Good
And
morning, everyone.
we were debating various topics this morning on what we were going to talk about. And so I will just put a teaser out there for a future topic. We're going to be talking about the League of Women Voters. Are they partisan, nonpartisan? I've reached out to them twice now through email to invite them onto this program to talk about whether they're really nonpartisan or partisan. My personal take on the League of Women Voters is the Republican Party should stay far away from them and not participate in their League of Women Voters events. They are hardly unbiased in things. They tend to manage or to uh, control the conversation that happens in their forums and so forth. The
They
property
steer to the left.
they are the property the property tax thing was a perfect example here recently, but I don't want to go into that too far because I think the topic that we chose this morning was, and it could have two titles. I prefer the stinking thinking title. Jonathan was talking about stupid thinking. Too often in our public offices, we have individuals who apply the dumbest thought processes and make the stupidest decisions. Much of it ideologically oriented, much of it some personal opinion or thought, and they just want to push some agenda from the public officials. You know, they were elected, now they've got this podium, and they feel obligated to push their own personal ideas on the rest of the public. And school boards are some school boards are famous for this. I can't say West G. I think is got a new board and they've been pretty good, but there are some school boards that really are off the rails. Many of them in Lake County. Sorry, Lake County. I hate to tell you, but Mentor and a few of the other school boards in Mentor in Lake County are just filled with stinking thinking, in my viewpoint, or maybe stupid thinking on the part of Jonathan's viewpoint. But we'll have a conversation this morning about all things stinking thinking and how is it that government is just off the rails sometimes with their, I'll use climate change coming from NOACA. You know, I can't have a show without talking about NOACA. But climate change, and you're not hearing much about that today with Trump in office. And DEI was another stupid thinking, stinking thinking concept. We saw Biden. Oh my God, the people that he appointed that wore dresses, or oh my goodness, it just made you both laugh and sad. But anyway, Jonathan, weigh in on this whole idea of stupid thinking.
Well, yeah, that's as a starting point. I'm going to preface this by sharing an experience that we had. I shared this with Skip before the show started. Before moving out into Geauga County, before we escaped Beechwood and moved into Geauga County, that's the way that I like to put it. My wife ran for school board in Beechwood, and we have the now infamous experience of my wife pretty much going head to head with the head of the Democrat Ward Club for Beechwood, and I don't know if it was Beechwood and surrounding, whatever. So it was kind of the figurehead of the Democrat Party against my wife, and in this school board race. And that, by the way, just as a side note, because this factors into a lot of our conversations, but that actually marks the time when I learned that I'm racist, white supremacist, homophobic, xenophobic, anti-LGBTQ, anti-gay. I learned miraculously overnight when my wife ran for a position that all the name calling came out of the woods. That's the point that I'm making here. But what ends up happening through that ridiculous process is you end up with some of the worst on school board. And during that experience, my wife had a very good campaign, very successful strategy, a lot of successes. And then a name you may recognize, Senator Sherrod Brown came in directly into Beechwood to campaign against my wife and schmooze people. And that high mark is the reason my wife lost that school board race. Anyway, so on to Beechwood schools. Most people in this area know and have an image of what Beechwood schools looks like. Well, remember 3 or 4 years ago when the firearms laws changed in the state of Ohio, there was a lot of discussion about what types of places might arm and which ones wouldn't. And people looked to local school districts and asked, are you going to implement a policy around firearms in the schools? And of course, the objective of everybody sane and reasonable is what's the best policy that protects children? Because that's the mission. That's just like it should be the mission of schools to educate. It's the mission of schools to protect them. And schools might vet that and discuss that and come out with different answers, but just mind-bogglingly, stupidly, in a moronic fashion. Beechwood schools, I don't even know if they met and discussed it, but they had a huge public announcement pushed out to the world announcing that virtually nobody there would be armed. That they announced to the world that the faculty, staff, teachers, you name it, nobody would be armed. I'm like, look, if you make that decision as a school board, great. You then do your job, look at the pros and cons, weigh it, discuss it, and decide. But by all means, don't issue a public announcement. In my book, I've spent 5 years wondering about it, and the only answer that it has that makes any sense at all is just pure dumb virtue signaling. Why would you announce that nobody's armed in the school? That is, to me, a prime example of stinking thinking. It's bad policy, it's stinking thinking. And Skip, I'm going to take your opening comments one step further. I think in a lot of regards, in a lot of places, you find people who are unthinking. It's not even just stinking thinking. You get people who are so caught up in whatever the system is that they are ready to rubber stamp whatever. So if somebody shows up, and I'm sorry to say it, but frequently in a lot of these boards and in these types of environments where you have leadership, you have lawyers that come in. Oh boy, once the lawyers come in and start talking big lawyer talk, a lot of people get kind of glazed over and dazzled by it, and they're ready to rubber stamp whatever. So we need to talk about stinking thinking, and we need to talk about what it takes to be a better citizen and a better steward of whatever that agency or facility or nonprofit or government organization is. If you get on a school board, and I encourage more people out there to run, if you are pro education, if you're pro child and childhood, and don't buy into the current narrative of anti-American race baiting, gender confusion, education last, uh, America last, all that stuff that's being pumped into schools right now, you should be running for school board. But in preparation, please, I'm asking you, please make of yourself a thinking person, a real educated, informed, thinking person who's willing to ask questions. And Skip, I see it all kinds of different places. I see it within the Republican Party, for heaven's sakes. There are plenty of people within the Republican Party. I make the comment frequently, they could march right on down the street and go knock on the doors at the Democrat HQ and just slot right in. Nobody would know any different. And many of them are are completely opposed to the idea of debating anything or asking any questions. In my book, they don't belong in the Republican Party because we're a nation of people fighting and advocating for our rights, freedoms, and liberties. And that sometimes is a messy proposition. It takes real thinking, not stinking thinking. We're coming up on a break, but we've got a minute and a half here. I know you've got some sponsors to highlight for us today, Skip,
I
right?
do. One example of smart thinking is to choose a company called Red EFT. And actually, I just reached out to them. I've got a couple of trees that I need to have them take a look at. One's leaning toward my house. And so I'm going to
Oh,
have them
no.
come out and take a look at that. Red EFT, if you want to have somebody who really knows what they're doing, they do a fantastic job. They clean up afterwards. They're safe and they're fun to watch, actually. The owner, Andrew, is just amazing when he gets up in the trees and climbing around with his gear and stuff. All you got to do is call him or text him at 440-850-4968. We also, another example of a great smart thinking people is the VFW, both out of Chardon Middlefield and the American Legion. Veterans who I constantly encouraged you to stop into the VFW in Chardon or in Middlefield and buy a veteran a drink and pat him on the back and tell him thank you, particularly with what we
Yep.
see going on in Iran right now. Our veterans have worked so hard to keep our country safe and defend our republic and our constitution and so forth. We
It
really,
takes a lot of us.
so
We're
with that, I see us
heading
on the
into
break.
a break. Remember, you can dial in 440-946-9468. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
Mics are off. Mics are off.
All right. So, I mean, yeah, examples are everywhere. And, for me, I've gotten to the point once I started looking and paying attention, um, places like, well, it's not in Geauga County, but my wife and I like that Lucky's Grocery up on 44 in Lake County. It's up by 90 on 44.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd gone there several times. And then next thing I know, they're another one of those places. They put up an anti two-way sign. And then, if I'm remembering correctly, I think Lucky's took it one step further and said, "Hey, this means you, permit carriers in Ohio, etc." Like trying their darndest to put up all these signs. Like, if you're going to grocery shop in here, we want to make sure that you are as defenseless as possible. Um, and the whole idea of it. I mean, I could do a whole show on Second Amendment, but the idea of that, and why tackle it? I know a guy who in Medina who's he's got a great restaurant and um, he's got a sign up that surprised me that said no firearms. And I asked him about it, and he was like, "Oh, pretty much everybody I know knows to ignore that. I have to have it up for insurance purposes, um, but if you're going to go in, what's the adage? I've heard it many times from many different peoples in a few different ways. I'd rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6. Um, in this environment, you have these deranged lunatics, and they seem to be growing and spreading, proliferating wildly. I just think that these businesses and the places that advertise that, like that there is truth to that expression. It's an unarmed victim zone, and I'm just not buying it.
Yeah, no, it's what the state of Ohio allows county commissioners to open up all the buildings, and they passed that law when I was a commissioner. And
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
I tried really hard to get Ralph and Tim to take the sticker off of the doors because I don't fear an honest concealed carry citizen. What I fear are those guys that don't abide by the laws and could walk in and get crazy. Now, thank God in Geauga County we don't have too many crazy people.
10 seconds. 10 seconds.
Welcome back to Voice of Geauga with Skip Claypool and myself, Jonathan Broadbent. We are discussing stinking thinking today. And I can't say that I learned, I relearned something during the break. I knew this, but it took Skip saying it again to sort of refresh my memory. I don't know if you know this, but it is actually uh, the policy of whether or not you are permitted to carry a firearm into government buildings is defined county by county. It's determined county by county, and it is possible in the county of Geauga for the. I guess it's a decision that the commissioners would make. The commissioners might decide to allow carry in buildings. Not to spend too much time on Second Amendment, but that just happens to be one area where stinking thinking is often plainly visible. But apparently, it is a decision that the county commissioners might make to open up the building to carry a firearm to protect oneself. But I made the example during the break of places like grocery stores, and some I've encountered some businesses. They not only will put up a sign, no firearms, you're not permitted to protect yourself in the event of some sort of emergency, and I call that unarmed victim zones. But there's one in particular, and I'm trying to remember exactly which one it is, that took it one step further and put a second sign next to it. And basically, the sign said something like, "This means you, lawful permit carriers in the state of Ohio, you also are not permitted to carry a firearm in our facility." I just think that that is a really dumb idea. I would advocate that smarter thinking, even if you feel that way, is just to not advertise one way or the other. As soon as you bring it up and try to create an environment where you've got this virtue signaling bubble, because that's all you're doing. You're sending a message like, "Ooh, look how cool we are because we're going to be this safe space." And with the actual real effect is exactly the opposite. And just to take that one step further, we do have great evidence on both sides. Just again, hopefully for the last time in today's discussion, using Second Amendment as an example, there are hundreds of thousands of examples that pretty much daily, all throughout every day, 365 days a year, of people defending and protecting themselves. Children, women, elderly are protected by private use of firearms. And there are great, horrifying examples of people who pick a place to go and do dastardly harmful things because they know that they're least likely to meet resistance there. They go and target places that are soft. In military and police speak, that's a soft target. Why announce to the world that you're a soft target? That's just thinking, thinking. And the same thing can be applied to First Amendment. Skip was saying right before the show started that we finally have some of these social media platforms that are getting a smack on the wrist for some of their behaviors. Locally here, personally, I think it would be delightful, and I think I would just go outside and do a little jig. If that, what's it called, next door? Next door is ridiculous. It's like blue sky. It is so far left. It is so policed and monitored as to be ridiculous and useless in my book. The moderators, the supposed moderators of Nextdoor, are so heavily, so far left and so entrenched, they cannot engage in discussion, even just simply pointing at and discussing facts. It can be anything. The sun is out, and they'll accuse you of something, racism or something. Um, but anyway, there are all kinds of examples of stinking thinking. What else comes to mind, Skip?
So I'm going to say one more time, if you want to demonstrate that you have good thinking, you can reach out to Red EFT Arborist, and their phone number is 440-850-4968. They do a phenomenal job at trimming trees, pruning trees, cutting down trees. If you've got a need in your area, do me a favor, call them at 440-850-4968 and tell them that you got that message from this program. They're actually paying to be on this program. And and I want to make sure that they're getting their money's worth. So if you have a
It's good
need,
to have sponsors.
I personally can endorse these guys. They do a fantastic job. It's a good deal, and the VFW is stopping by a veteran of beer. But let's do this, Jonathan. I started a list of stupid thinking or stinking thinking ideas. There's so many. I mean, we could do 2 hours or 3 hours on stinking thinking in government. But I produced a couple here that I'm going to throw it out at you. And this is Geauga County related. So if you look at recent commissioner meetings and where we had a bunch of people show up and ask Jim Dvorak and Carolyn Brakey to consider getting out of NOACA, them not even being willing to have a conversation with the public or respond to a planning commission letter that asked them to get out of NOACA, I think is an example of sneaking thinking. For Jim Dvorak to want to transfer the dog warden to the sheriff's department, our current dog warden is famous across the state for being able to save dogs and not put them down, but he actually finds homes for them, and he's very good at that. And Jim Dvorak wanted to promote that. Now he backed off of that and tried to say, "Oh no, I didn't do that." But there was an overflow room full of people that pushed back on it. Perfect example of stinking thinking. Electronic road signs, they annoy the crap out of me. We spend $30 million for or plus for these stupid electronic road signs that tell you slow down or it's raining outside when your windshield wipers are going, and you can obviously see that. I can tell you an example of where I was going through the mountains and in a blizzard and a snowstorm trying to keep my motor home in the middle of the road between a semi and the cars in a 3-lane highway. This electronic road sign flashed a bright white light in my eyes telling me it was snowing, and it almost killed me because it was blinding. The NOACA climate change thing. So I'm going to put out a challenge to all of our listeners. Send voiceofjug@gmail.com. Your top of the list stinking thinking in government ideas. Let's produce a reward or an award of some kind, maybe a basket we've got coming up, that somebody can win the best stinking thinking in government. I mean, there's so many to pick from. It would almost be a hard contest to judge. But those are some of my thoughts in terms of stinking thinking. One of which also is the whole Second Amendment sticker on the public doors. I don't fear honest Americans who have gone through and have no track record of any criminal activity having a firearm with them. I don't fear them. I mean, when I was growing up, everybody carried a gun, and you could buy a gun at the five and dime store. Um, Over time, the Democrats have managed to attempt to destroy our Second Amendment rights for a variety of reasons. But I
And
don't
the most
fear an honest person. What I fear is, somebody who doesn't care about the law and the goofiness that they do. And it's really stupid in a school. I love our police and so forth, but our law enforcement having a safety officer in the school, it really accomplishes very little, because if I'm a bad guy, the first guy I'm going to take out is that safety officer, and then I'm going to go do what I need to do. And so it's if the schools broadcast that every teacher was armed, whether they were or not, then they'd be looking for a different school, because they don't want that kind of resistance. So it's really stinking thinking that some of our school and our public officials use. And I could go on and on, and there's a list probably 100 long. But I'd love to hear some of our listeners out there talk about some of what they think are stinking thinking.
And we've got a couple. We've got Nana Sherrill 62 says crazies are all over the place. Just look at the no kings people. And I keep posting. I'm still waiting for anybody to find king. In the context of the U.S., what are you talking about? What policy, what behavior, what action are you defining? The only thing I can come up with is it's just the behaviors of anybody. If it makes you feel sad or upset or anxious, you call it king and then just go and protest. I think there's good evidence that many of those people that are involved are paid. I don't know yet. I can't point to specifics, but there's a lot of talk about that, including among politicians in DC. Whether or not there's foreign influence money coming in to pay these paid allegedly paid agitators. There's also a great comment here. I talk to people who don't carry insurance to cover any consequences of carrying a firearm. Please comment. We're coming up on a break, but that's certainly something I'm willing to comment on. I'm not a professional in this arena, but I do know a moderate amount about insurance and insurance coverage, those kinds of things that factor in. We're going to come back with more conversation around stinking thinking when we come back on the other side of the break. Remember, you can dial in 440-946-9468. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
Mics are off. Mics are off.
Yeah, I think spending $400,000 to remodel a prosecutor's office is an example of stinking thinking.
Yeah.
I maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe I need to be fair and to look at the plans, because it could be justification, I suppose, for that. But putting the courthouse, surrounding the courthouse downtown in downtown Chardon with I don't know what the cost on it is today, $30 million or $40 million, to kind of destroy the look on an 1890s courthouse, which was um, kind of unique historic building. Now we wrecked that whole building. That's stinking thinking on the part of the political establishment in downtown Chardon, where downtown Chardon could have been a robust city that had, a nightlife, and that had hours from 8 until 9 or 10 at night, and now it's just a public office square. And 8 to 5 or 8 to 4, because a lot of elected officials or public officials don't work that long. And that's just another example of stinking thinking. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Oh my goodness. The League of Women Voters and the way that they run these meetings, that's pure stinking thinking. So,
Well, on their part, it's smart, because if you want to push a far left agenda, one of the smartest things to do is control media and then control public narrative, which means social media platforms and things like their well-earned nickname, League of Women Vipers. I don't care for them.
I've never heard of that before. I mean, as
No,
as people, they're nice people. Years ago, when I moved to Geauga County, I knew a lady, Janet Kramars. She was my realtor at the time. Very conservative lady, but she was a part of the League of Women Voters, and she invited me to take part in the League of Women Voters. So I went to a few meetings. Marion Balaz, who was at that time the president of, was a far left-leaning person, but we had rational conversations and debated things back and forth, and there was some balance in the League of Women Voters then, but for some reason
what year would this have been?
they have totally, that was around 2006, and so they totally went sideways in their membership and the things that they advocate for. If you look at their website today, it's clear who they advocate for. If you look at, they sort candidates from Democrat to Republican. They put Democrats at the bottom. Vivek Ramaswamy is second from the bottom in the list of people running for governor. And so it's pretty obvious their bias. All you got to do is look. But AP classes, etc., busing, removing teachers instead of the administrative, hurting the kids, stinking thinking. Yeah, stinking thinking in schools. And there is, in all schools, and schools are people, and people sometimes do goofy things. So and that's what you got to be on guard for, and point it out to people so that they can make a correction to their stinking thinking. And oftentimes we do that. We go to school board meetings, we bring stuff up that gets them to think, and then they kind of change their direction, which is good.
Yeah, so I think what we have here is a dearth of critical thinking skills. There's so many people.
30 seconds, 30 seconds.
And we keep seeing them and pointing them out. There are people all around who are either just harebrained thinking, or they're just not thinking at all. And they take these roles either for the money, or they think it's like a social prestige or something. Frustrating.
10 seconds, 10 seconds.
Welcome back to Voice of Geauga and WINT Radio. Tomorrow's show, Friday, we are working on having Steve Olowich come back and join us. We're looking at Frank Kavanaugh, probably early next week, probably Tuesday. Stay tuned for that. If you follow on social media, you'll see our announcement and schedule as we maintain it. And during tomorrow's show, it's my intention to come up with a trivia question. I have one in mind to raffle away that beautiful basket from Village Viking Fest. Those are the great folks that Frank Kavanaugh introduced us to. Village Viking Fest is coming up. They have their launch date on, I believe it's May 1st. They're going to be launching. They put together a beautiful gift basket. We're going to come up with a trivia question and give it away.
Why don't we get them on the program next week, Jonathan?
I will work on that. We've got a great contact there. I'll work on getting
Yeah,
Village Viking Fest because they've got a pretty cool thing. I didn't
They
even know
do.
it existed.
They do.
Now
They,
that I've looked into it, thank you, Frank Kavanaugh. So we've got some great comments here. Let's see, we've got a comment: medicine, law, education, journalism, finance, all have been exposed as being run by ideologues. It's pretty revolting. We've got Nana Sherrill says Stake and Thinking schools asking for levies on top of all the money that's already being collected via property taxes. And many of these schools now, because of the ballooning property taxes, have huge carryover budget. They've got massive budget. And just for perspective, talk about stinking thinking. Let's consider these raw numbers that have come up several times during conversations with our state representatives on Ohio political news. Ohio's public education system, our government schools, in total combined, have about $10 billion of cash they're sitting on. For comparison, our state rainy day fund is around $4 billion. So our state schools possess more cash on hand than our entire state rainy day fund, more than twice as much. So there is a great comment from Nana Sherrill. Stake and Thinking removed advanced placement classes, AP classes, and busing, etc. Removing teachers instead of the administrators. It hurts children. And that's a great, great point. I want to pause there. When you get into these school districts, they constantly, routinely ask for more and more and more and more and more money. The types of school districts like Wycliffe, I like to point to, that recently spent over $32,000 per pupil to achieve roughly 50% academic proficiency, according to the state's softened standards. You get there by had the district constantly asking for more and more money. Well, part of their technique in doing that is to hold the children hostage and say, well, if they don't, they can't have extracurriculars, and we're going to have to close band, and we're going to have to cut back on busing. We'll have to reduce or eliminate advanced placement and AP and accelerated and gifted programs. And they'll say all that publicly. Meanwhile, they've got about 15 different principals and administrators, and they've got assistants to the principals, and the assistants have assistants. The administrative bloat is mind-boggling. And the administrators in these school districts are the last people who will be facing a job cut. And it's exactly the opposite of what should be happening in school districts. That's stinking thinking. Thanks for that example.
so let me give you two more that people should think about. And Carolyn Brakey, just before she got elected, led an effort to move our health district to Lake County. It's now controlled and managed by Lake County. And the argument is, no, it's not controlled. We have a board. Yeah, but the board is a rubber stamp. It's a rubber stamp for the director, which is a Lake County person. And so all of their policies, all the procedures, everything they do is oriented around Lake County. We moved our transit to Lake County. So now Lake County values, Lake County ideas, concepts, they don't really think about Geauga County, are controlling what is happening in Geauga County. That was just stinking thinking. There is a value in
Yeah.
paying a little extra. It's actually worth paying a little extra to keep sovereignty in Geauga County. So that's just a pure example of government stinking thinking, not rationalizing or thinking through the long-term impacts of doing something like that. And by the way, the health department is controlled by the townships, and each township has a person that's on this thing called the Health Advisory Committee. You should reach out to your township trustees. If you don't like the fact that our health department is being run out of Lake County, you need to talk to your trustees. They've got an advisor on a health advisory committee, and they can bring that back to Geauga County, and they should, in my opinion. I can make an argument for that. Go to skipclaypool.com. There's a video on there that shows the meeting that happened in which that was transferred. It contains a lot of content about the argument and why the argument was screwed up. But anyway, that's just an example of stinking thinking that people may not be plugged into.
Yeah, there are a bunch of comments coming through. It looks like we've kind of hit a hot button here. Gardens of CH says library and senior center monstrous new plans or more bad ideas. Yeah, and we talked about that a number of times. It seems like uh, there's a library that was brought to my attention that has so little traffic. They actually started renting lawn care equipment. So you can get like a leaf blower and a edge trimmer and stuff. You can rent them from the library. They're trying desperately to get anybody to show up anymore because people are, generally speaking, not like when we were kids. They're not going into the library and sitting around, not in large numbers, but they have these Taj Mahal, just these ivory tower buildings, and they seem to just constantly be building more new ones. Well, I learned something from Brian Massey on Ohio Political News. I have not researched this, but I like Brian Massey and trust him. I believe this is likely to be true. Brian Massey made the comment on Ohio Political News that our library system is the only element of our taxpayer funded system in Ohio that doesn't have a dollar amount attached to it. It's only a percentage. So a percentage of Ohio's taxes goes toward funding our libraries. And the more our taxes balloon, the more money they get. So when we went from, what was it, about 67 billion pre-COVID to now over 100 billion in our budget, it just means huge windfall gains for doing nothing different. Other agencies, they might have a spend of maybe, let's say maybe they're given $100 million, and maybe that's indexed to something and it increases slightly each year. The library system, if in a few years our ridiculous bloated state budget goes to 200 billion, they've twice as much money according to the system of payment that we have in Ohio, and according to Brian Massey's comments. That's mind-boggling. And so I think what we're seeing with libraries is they're just struggling trying to find creative ways of spending all that money. There's so much money flooding into libraries for the whatever it is, a couple dozen people that come through in person. They can come through. I mean, at the kind of tax rates, they can come through and get a massage chair and maybe get a car wash and detail and pick up their book with a steak and lobster dinner. I mean, how much money, for heaven's sakes, do we need? And we have people that are losing their homes, being put out on the streets. Well, we've got these ridiculously high taxes. So looks like we have a caller. Cheryl from Wycliffe is on the phone. Cheryl, you're on Voice of Geauga.
Good morning. Here's another thinking. Lake County spent $1.8 million to do the revaluations on our homes. Thinking. To take you back to the top of your program about guns, when I used to be a driver for Lake Catholic High School, so I worked there for 13 years, and during that time, a company came in, put up all the security cameras, and the outside door of the main entrance of posted the sticker with a circle and a gun in it and a line through that. That is thinking and inviting a crazy to come into a school. All they have to do is buzz in, say whoever they are, and there you go. You're done. That's the stinking thinking.
That is stinking thinking. It's Cheryl, thanks for the comments. I agree with you completely. We've got a great comment from One Concrete asking if we would please remind the audience that tonight is the county women's GOP meeting at 6:30. At speaking of library, it's at the West Geauga Public Library. 6:30 tonight at West Geauga Public Library. According to One Concrete, is the women's GOP meeting. I actually don't have that on my calendar, so I'm not able to personally confirm, but that sounds right to me. And I know Skip was talking about another opportunity to meet the candidates in Geauga County. That is at the Metzenbaum Center, right, Skip, on the 30th.
Yes.
What time is that? Do you know?
6:30. 6:30.
So 6:30 at the Metzenbaum Center on the 30th, you can come and meet the candidates, meet the GOP candidates. We're coming up on a
Nope,
break.
I'm
but
wrong.
also-
That was 6 o'clock. I'm sorry. I got that
6
wrong.
o'clock on the 30th. 6 o'clock at the Metzenbaum Center on the 30th. Come meet the GOP candidates. And if you are in Lake County, mark your calendar for the 31st. There are a number of us, including yours truly. I will be one of the speakers at the Lake County Liberty Coalition. That's Nancy Mara, Brian Massey, John Mara, and that great group of folks fighting for conservative values in Lake County. We're going to come back with more on the other side of the break.
Fussing and fighting, my friend.
Mics are off. Mics are off.
All right. So we've got some great comments here. Don't forget this Saturday, Nikki Frenchco will be at Beans Coffee Shop in Chardon Square. Oh yeah, I'll announce that one when you come back. So I did have a funny exchange. I received a text message following up on that radio interview with Nikki Frenchco, and I'll tell you what, this whole thing that has come out, and apparently, according to what I'm hearing, it was Dave Joyce in an interview with a reporter from Cleveland.com and the Cleveland Plain Dealer, who coined that phrase "Naked Nikki," as if her going to a beach in wherever it was, France or whatever, her spending a day on a beach
St. Martin.
is some St. Martin. Is that where it is?
Yeah, it's a French island that has a nude beach. So it's wet.
It's a French island that has a new. That's I think the element that I was picking up on. I will say that I have no interest, and I haven't seen any of the pictures, and I don't care. I am a happily married man. I don't need any pictures of naked women. Which reminds me to encourage the audience to dismiss it. Who cares? It's somebody went to a beach, and oh my gosh, there's a human form. Whatever. It's not illegal. It's something this person did. Let's refocus our brain and mind on what matters. And
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
I actually sent an email that somebody was like in an outrage, in this uproar about how she had gone to a nude beach. Oh my gosh, heaven forbid. Why this huge list of bullet points of major issues with current Representative Dave Joyce? We need answers to those, and we need good
10
representation.
seconds. 10 seconds.
Welcome back to Voice of Geauga with Skip Claypool and myself, Jonathan Broadbent. Today we're talking about stinkin' thinking. And there is a note that I happened to catch my eye here in Rumble. It's your cue to find us on Rumble. Don't forget to follow, like, share, click that thumbs up. That all helps Voice of Geauga. Helps us to get the message out and get in front of more folks. It's this Saturday, I believe. Nikki Frenchco will be at Beans. I'm skimming through now. Where is that? I hope to meet everyone.
That's in
let's
Chardon,
see.
Ohio.
In Chardon, here it is, 10 a.m. at Beans in Chardon this Saturday. Nikki Frenchko will be there. Darafy, thank you for that comment. It took me a moment to skim through. There's a lot of comments. So apparently this is a hot button topic we've picked for today. I'm glad to see a lot of engagement on Rumble. So there are many examples. And, Skip, you were talking about commissioners' meetings. And recently, I've used this. I bring up that $400,000 office renovation for our county prosecutor, not because that's the only thing that's happened, but because that represents, in my book, a good example of stinking thinking. I heard about it and went into the meeting to challenge it. Why on earth, if we have people who are struggling to put food on the table, and we have people who are losing their farms and are struggling to pay the bills or do the necessary car repair work to stay on the roads and stay active in their jobs, there are people really financially struggling. Why are we rubber stamping a $400,000 office renovation? And in addition to the possibility, the strong possibility that $400,000 is overspending, there's another piece of stinking thinking that came out of that commissioners meeting. Because I stood up at the microphone and said, hey, commissioners, what are you doing here? We got people who are pushing for Doge, who would like accountability. We just experienced a 30% increase in property taxes. People are struggling. People are hurting out here. Why are you rubber stamping a $400,000 office renovation? The response that I saw and got from Commissioner Carolyn Brakey was outrageous. It was the worst. Just this flippant roll of the eyes. You can go and watch it on video. It's on YouTube. And this whole the clear message was, why would we possibly pause to consider this? That's a chump change. It's just this tiny little pittance. In her book, this is what I got from it. She spends her weeks rubber stamping 1.6 million for that, 6.2 million for this, 4.1 million for that, and it's just all day, every day, just stamp, 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 all this millions and millions of dollars flowing through. And it's a clear message that I got from her, like $400,000. Why would we pause to worry about that? Because, Commissioner Brakey, my answer to that is it matters, because that is taxpayer dollars that you are spending. And if you don't pause with that and everything else, then what we end up with is blooming homelessness, joblessness, struggling to eat, keep a roof over our heads. That is why people are put into office, to be stewards of the will and interests of we the people, not to make a buddy feel good with a gold-plated office or whatever that $400,000 bought. I don't know. Maybe I'll go visit someday. I'll go and have a meeting with our county prosecutor, and maybe, who knows? Maybe there's a gold-plated toilet. I've heard about that in Trump's tower. Maybe he has one now too. I don't know. I don't know what the $400,000 bought, but that attitude was terrible. So in my book, that just really that hit me sideways. And what other examples can we put out there for the audience?
Let me
What
give
else,
you,
Skip?
let me give you another one that is, I mean, again, I could go, there's a thousand of them. I can go to the township trustees, I can go to the Metropolitan Housing Authority, I can go to the health department. I mean, the stinking thinking is throughout our political establishment. That's the reason people need to be involved and watch things. But let's talk about ADP for a second. ADP, Automatic Data Processing Board, which is currently chaired by the auditor in our county, is providing services to townships. If you look at the contract, those services are pretty expensive. Now, he would say, well, those are competitive with the outside contracting world. Well, why would we ever do that? It's not a business. So we're taking a taxpayer funded organization, the ADP, and I want to say a lot of the people that work there are good people. they're technical people. They have a lot of technical skills. They work hard. They try to do a good job. The management I question a bit, and the stinking thinking on why we would charge so much for services to another government agency, which then has to pay with tax dollars for that same service. We ought to be providing those at a cost neutral perspective. And
Yep.
Chuck, if you want to come on this program and talk about that, I would love to hear your argument for that. And maybe we're wrong, Jonathan. Maybe we don't understand. Maybe we don't understand the $400,000 that are being into remodeling because it's in an old building, the Opera House or whatever, in those old buildings, which we should have moved out of and moved into brand new county offices. That whole courthouse complex and everything should have been moved to a brand new facility so we wouldn't have been paying tax dollars to renovate these old buildings downtown. Private industry could have done that and made Chardon a modern city, but no, we chose to use tax dollars to modernize stuff. And maybe that $400,000 is just to shore up bad infrastructure in those old buildings. But on the surface, it doesn't make any sense, and the commissioners should at least address that and ask questions about that so the public understands and knows that their tax dollars aren't being frittered away. But the ADP, with what we understand to be huge salaries, and paying a director who's not really trained to be an IT guy, all of that doesn't make any sense. Seems like stinking thinking to us, and requires some justification. And the board, because the board controls things, the auditor is simply the chair of that board. The board ought to be asking these questions. So each of those board members should be saying, hey, let's look at this contract. Let's evaluate this. Are we doing the right things for the citizens of our county?
Yeah. Skip, I just opened up Facebook on a spur of the moment thought. And it appears, unfortunately, because of the way that Voice of Geauga is set up on Facebook, I believe it's a page instead of a group. I always get those confused. It doesn't appear that I can initiate a poll, but I'm thinking I may make a post on Facebook asking for feedback. With this whole dust up, with this whole thing around Nikki Frenchko and being called Naked Nikki, and the back and forth that seems to be taking place between Representative David Joyce and his candidate competition, Nikki Frenchko. Should we have Nikki Frenchko back on the air? I'm thinking we should. Let's get her feedback on what's happening, the campaign strategy. There are a lot of people, and they're kind of divided into two camps. But there are a lot of people that think it was smart strategy. Instead of ducking and hiding and running defense when she was called Naked Nikki over going to a beach, she leaned into it, and she's created this whole expose on her opponent, Dave Joyce. So
I'm gonna reach out to Dave Joyce today and invite him on the program. Maybe we can get them both on.
Do.
Yeah.
We want to do that consistently and often. So we're coming up on the conclusion of the show, but remember to be on the lookout for stinking thinking in your area, and that's a big part of Voice of Geauga.
Yeah, send us an example. Send us an example on voiceofgeauga@gmail.com, and we'll bring it on the program. We'll talk. Let's make this a regular topic because there's so much stinking thinking.
Perfect. Yep, we will make it a regular topic. Thanks everybody for tuning in to Voice of Geauga. Have a great day.
Mics are off. Mics are off.